moving, and we'll go through the agenda. Thank you for attending. Really appreciate it. And we'll start with the Sigma update.
Yeah. Do you need any introductions or anything, or?
I don't think so.
Are we good?
I think we're pretty good here.
Knows everyone.
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm gonna, as our usual, we try to give you some updates on what's going on, in the different, the two different subbasins, and make you aware of any issues, and then get any feedback from the group as well. The obvious question that some of you might have is, have we received any comments back on the recently submitted groundwater sustainability plans? I didn't check today, but I checked on Monday, and we hadn't received any as of Monday on the GSPs. The last day to comment is coming up here on the 29th.
I thought it was 30th.
The 30th, yeah, the 30th.
Friday night.
And that's it. And then if we get any comments, we'll be looking at those comments and responding. We also have not received anything formal from DWR. So if we hear anything from DWR, we will let you know. The Tulare Lake Subbasin last week had a GSA managers meeting. And in that meeting, some of the GSA managers, the El Rico GSA in particular, are meeting with the State Water Resources Control Board tomorrow on Thursday. So I don't know, obviously we don't know yet the outcome of that meeting, but just, the short version for everyone to remember is that we suspect, due to the differences in the resolutions that approve the the GSP, that the DWR is likely defined as being incomplete, and therefore start negotiations and consultations with the State Water Board, and that's how the State Water Board would get involved.
So we're just meeting with the staff up there?
They are meeting with staff as far as we know, Mike. I don't have a list of attendees of that meeting. That was set up privately or individually by that GSA. So I don't.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, right. The other issue that has come up in the last Tri-County Board meeting was one of the directors raised some concerns about our grant funding, and if that grant funding would be in jeopardy. And what we've done is we've set up a meeting with the grant staff at DWR to have that conversation. There is language in the guidance document that was in writing from DWR that specifically says that even if you're not in compliance, you will the funding will still be there. But the agreement we signed does not include that language. So we just want to make sure that language from the guidance document is still applicable, because it clearly says that, hey, we still want you to achieve sustainability. So let me pause a second and see if anyone has any questions on the GSP status. And please feel free to.
So you signed an agreement with DWR for the grant funding that was given to you, and that was the large grant, correct?
Yeah. So to be clear, David, let me just clarify that. We have signed that agreement on the Tulare Lake side. We have not yet received and finalized that agreement on the Tule side, just to be clear.
Okay.
I did receive this week from DocuSign my portion to sign for the
Oh,
two.
good.
So
Okay.
we're very close.
All right, so we're close on the Tule side. That's good. making us all a little nervous.
I think they've got everything ironed out, and they're
Okay.
going through the signature process now for the Thule side.
Excellent. Hey, David, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Did you
No,
have?
it's okay, because I just wanted to be clear, obviously, we watch those grants as well for you, so that's why I wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, that's the round one grant for Sigma implementation, $7.6 million per subbasin.
Right.
Just so that everyone on the call is clear. On the Tulare Lake side, we are actually, since we've signed it, we actually have moved forward with several of the projects, and we're actually getting ready to start talking about our first reimbursement request to be prepared in the next month or so. So we're moving on the Tulare Lake side. We are, there's definitely a lot of movement on the project side. The project that you guys might be the most interested in on the Tulare Lake is that sediment removal in the river, which I know Carl has his opinion on. But that project is actually out to bid. We knocked out the design drawings in about 3 weeks, and it's out on the street right now getting bids from contractors.
So what stretch of the river are they actually doing?
It's from Jackson, the bridge at Jackson, heading down to Empire Weir 1. So that pool 1, I believe, is what they call it.
Yeah,
Mike?
I have my river landing right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That right there, that stretch, we're gonna be looking to remove about 300,000 cubic yard of sediment in that section of the river.
One thing, just talking to somebody local right there, I've heard them, we're gonna sell this dirt or sand.
Yeah.
The locals say there is no, it's all silt in there.
Yeah.
So
Right now, we're just stockpiling it, and then KRCD is gonna be responsible for, we're actually have permission to stockpile on the Newton property next to it, and on some,
Grimson's, isn't it? It is on the Empires. Grimson's on the south side of the river by the weir.
yes, and that's the other property that we're gonna be putting some, the sediment on. And we are gonna try, as much as you realistically can, keep the organics in one pile and the sediment in the other pile, but it's, it's not gonna be perfect. I actually walked it 2 weeks ago, and boy, if you're standing in the river bottom right now, you are above the levee.
Yeah.
There's almost that much sediment.
All the years of water skiing out there, it's getting shallower and shallower.
Yeah.
When you fall, you stand up. So,
Danger.
Yeah, so we're definitely, that's an area that definitely needed it. And then there's other parts that are gonna be addressed with other funds, later.
yeah.
From the GSA or GSA's perspective, in the early reimbursements, will they be reimbursing the cost for the revisions to
Yes.
the plan?
Yes, so the preparation of the GSP is the number one issue, is, why we wanna get the first reimbursement in. That's right, good point, Dan, that's right.
And just for this group, so you know, that was a part of the grant funding for the Tulare Lake side, but the Thule did not have that for the Thule side. So our revisions to our GSP, will be paid from the GSA, but the revisions in Tulare Lake will be reimbursed.
Yeah. The other thing that Tulare Lake is moving forward on is a well registry program. We are gonna move forward on that. There is still some debate going on as to exactly what the database that we'll use on that, and that's an ongoing discussion between some of the GSA managers. But in a short nutshell, those are some of the key issues. I figured the real issue everybody wanted to hear about is probably the update on any GSP, if we've heard anything from DWR. Dan, did you want to talk anything about Basin Safe? Anything update?
Also, on the subbasins, you should note that we are in fall measurements right now, here in early October. So
yep.
we're gonna be completing the fall measurements, and working, incorporating those for the annual report. Basin Safe, we just sent out, a monthly invoice for basically for overdue invoices, and we have very few overdue invoices, and I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody, working with us. In respect to Basin Safe, we are constantly looking at the evapotranspiration numbers. I think we are seeing that in the case of precipitation overall, it may be over-calculating precipitation, and the numbers due to that come in a little low in times. We're still looking at that. I think another issue that we're going to have to look at eventually is I now am aware of at least 6 wells within Tri-County's boundaries that are moving water that are not being calculated through evapotranspiration or land IQ. So that's going to have to be addressed on fairly short notice. If it looks like overall land IQ, as we move down the road, if many people are moving water around more, which may happen just due to the fact that water prices are going to be higher and people might fallow land and want to move their water, we may really have to revert back to all metering program and look at that in the future. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because currently we do have requirements that everybody is metered, but we've been working through the land IQ system for all invoicing, and that may change in the future. So, and that's really it for Basin Safe right now.
You're back on the cleaning project. What is the purpose? Is it to open up flow in the river, or are they thinking it's gonna sink more water, or, I mean, what is?
Well, all of the
There's a
above.
lot I can tell you because Empire is really concerned about it because they get charged for, filling up that pool and then stranding water out there, and so.
All of the river units, for water below there should be concerned about increasing the losses.
Yeah.
It reduces their delivery.
Yeah, so, Mike, it's primarily, there's a concern on flood issue, because we've had failures on that levee, or north of there, and then if you start to look at it, that restriction, the amount of sediment that's there, that was probably the number one area on the river that had the most sediment, and that we're not technically meeting our requirements for freeboard and all of that. So that was one of the big areas that we wanted to address, but it is to increase capacity or regain capacities, I should say. We're not messing with a levee at all. This is treated as a maintenance issue for the river. But we are hoping, in that part of the world, we're not going to sink that much water. That part of the river, it's not, it's really not going to sink that much water. There might be a little bit, but we don't anticipate more losses.
So this is more of a flood control.
It's really driven by some flood control concerns.
Because, KRCD went in there and stripped out almost all the vegetation in
Yeah.
there now, and so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wasn't too happy because they just tore my lawn all up.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But I can tell you, Empire is really concerned about how much more water is gonna take to charge up that pool. And like Carlo, you said,
They get charged, they basically feed the gauge, have an area capacity table before the run. And at the end of the run, and then they are charged for the water, change and storage. Then they're able to use it.
Mike, do you want us to talk to Empire separately? Do you want to set up a meeting with Empire, any concerns that they have? And I can
Coordinate with Scott Sills on that.
Sure.
Isn't the ball already rolling free, gaining push on this?
I'm sorry, Carl, I'm sorry.
This project, isn't the ball already rolling?
Well, it's on the street. It's getting bids right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what good it's gonna, on the record.
But before before we get the contractor on board, if we, you know, if Scott has some concerns that we can address or do something slightly different, then we can make that change now. So, yeah, we're willing to,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Is
I'll
there
get
a
Scott.
plan, what they're actually gonna do? I mean,
Yep.
can you send that to me,
Yep.
the electronic?
Yep.
Okay. I'll get that over to Scott.
Yeah, I will do that. In fact, I'll text somebody later today.
Remind me, how much is this gonna cost about?
The budget for this is 1.6 million.
300,000 yards?
Yeah. Roughly, yeah. Okay, let's see, moving on, sorry, to the Lower Deer Creek Watershed Plan, Ren's not on, is he? Kathy, do you want to add anything on that, or should we can?
Nothing is moving forward right now. It's in NRCS's court with this plan. So yeah, nothing to report.
All right, Kathy? Oh, yes, I'm glad you said that, thank you, Stacy. David, if you want to go now, I'll put you ahead on the agenda so that I know you've got to jump off at 10:30, so why don't, if you've got anything to report, please.
Well, we don't have a lot to report right now over the last few weeks, but the one thing that you're all aware of is that our persistence with the Secretary of Resources, Crowfoot, ended up paying off in terms of what we've been trying to accomplish for Allensworth through those grants. As you'll recall, that basically was almost a 2-year effort in terms of really trying to bring their attention after he had that initial town hall meeting in 2021, I guess it was, or maybe it was 2020, I'm forgetting. But anyway, so we were pleased that all came about. We're going to be in the process of putting together a report for your board meeting so that we can give you a whole recap on the past year. As you know, we've been tracking legislation very closely, and we were also watching the legislature for opportunities with trailer bills, which, you know, Rusty and I were on a call with Senator Atkins, who told us that in the Senate side, they were already budgeted. There wasn't going to be any extra money on their side. But as Rusty can tell you, and I'll let Rusty describe this, we recently met directly with Governor Newsom, and there is a lot of money out there. So Rusty, I'm going to let you report on that meeting that we had with Governor Newsom about a month ago.
Yeah, the external environment has never been better, and all of us are aware of the, California budget process and how it seems to be feast and famine. And right now, we continue to build surpluses. There's more money available than there has ever been. So the combination of the drought and huge budget surpluses really puts us in a position to attract funding for whatever priorities that we establish. So, you really ought to try to take advantage of it while you can, because, when there's shortfalls, the shortfalls will be as big as the surpluses.
Good point, and there certainly is a lot of grant money out there right now as well.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rusty.
Thank you.
I know you guys have to jump off here, so we understand. Kathy, on the multi-purpose grant, this is the land repurposing grant for everyone. We recently, the local grant recipients, meaning, both Kauai, ourselves, and what was the?
Salinas.
Salinas, yes, thank you. The three of us got together with DWR, the week before, and.
DOC.
Oh, DOC, I'm sorry, I said DWR. I'm so used to talking about DWR, but it was the Department of Conservation, sorry. And we got together and they kind of did a meeting with all of the grant recipients to share ideas and talk about, how things are gonna be handled. Deanna and I were able to attend. Deanna had to sit through the whole thing. She was nice enough to let me, sneak out a little early. But I think, and Kathy, I don't know if you know this, or Deanna, if you know this, has the actual grant agreement been signed? I know it was.
I don't know yet. We do have a meeting on Friday at 3:00, a team
Right.
meeting. So I assume you're going to be attending that and we'll probably get some more news.
One of my observations from the meeting was, that the Tule Subbasin's, grant, we were much more organized, and had more firm plans in place than both Kauai and Salinas. So, yeah, I think we're positioned well to start working on some of these things. I think, we're going to, from Tri-County's perspective, there's really two things that we want to work on and make sure we have input on. And one is, how the, land repurposing program comes together to make sure it's viable for Tri-County's landowners. And then the, money that we have for the Allensworth project area, for about $400,000 for the resiliency and some additional funding. I want to make sure that we, incorporate, the community in those discussions and move forward on that respect. So the two biggest things that we want to make sure come out of this grant for Tri-County.
We, I think
And
Deanna
a
nailed it.
little, hey, a little bit of an additional update that people may be interested in. Out of this grant agreement, the Tule Basin Land and Water Conservation Trust, it's a land trust that started up about 2.5 years ago. I happened to be on the board of directors and we had a meeting yesterday. And Amir and Deanna, you're aware of this position that is going to be funded through this multi-benefit grant. It's out on the street. It's for a program manager that's not going to manage the grant, but they're going to be working with the land trust and helping the land trust build capacity. The position, if you have an interest, you can contact me or you can contact Dan Vink. But the position is going to pay $100,000 a year, and it is for a 3-year duration. And so sorry, I didn't send you the position description, but I'll get that over to Deanna and to you, Amir, because we're looking for somebody that is local, that could help with the land repurposing planning, with some of the restoration activities, but also help with the land trust in developing their programs, working with the Land Trust Alliance. So that's a piece that has come out of this DOC grant. I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, and the land trust is gonna be a key part of this, any land repurposing
Yes.
program moving forward. And any projects that come out of this across the subbasin as well. The idea here is to get the land repurposing plan written as a Tri-County plan and focus in on Tri-County. And this group in particular is going to be a big part of that because we want a lot of stakeholder input on what Tri-County wants to do with that, within that land repurposing and how we want to handle if land does go out of production, what do we want to do with it? How do we want to try and make people whole and come up with some viable options for people?
Catherine, remind me the boundaries of the land trust. Is that the entire Tule Subbasin?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
Ask you, Amir, on that, we're kind of rethinking this Liberty flood storage wetland project, and I've been meeting with, under this land repurposing, could we fit some of that funding on that land?
So, so Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the Liberty project is within the boundary of the plant.
You know, I'm not sure, because, you know, Kauai receives some funding. If Liberty is within, I mean, there's going to be other funding coming down, but I need to talk with somebody on that, because I do have all the Liberty Ranch stuff on my computer too.
Yeah, Kathy, and I've met with the Bureau on it. You know, there's federal money, they said that's available, and I've met with the Indian tribe, and they're all gung-ho about doing something down there, and of course, you know, I think the disadvantaged communities and others would be interested in putting something together.
This particular grant is a Tule Subbasin grant, so it's
Right.
problematic.
What if, Deanna, though, if we're taking water that we can back up into the Tule side? Because that was one of the thoughts, you know, to deal with some of our pumping and BSA issues.
I think it fits better within the, maybe the Sigma grant process.
Yeah,
I think it'd be hard to get that money out of this grant, and I don't think there'll be enough left over to move out there. This grant really everything's already spoken for, except for, they are looking for a couple more projects, but there's not a lot of money there, and, the group would have to agree that, I think it'd be tough, just honestly.
yeah, I agree with Deanna, but is that Mike talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Sorry.
You know, I met years ago when I was working as the watershed coordinator and started working with y'all. I did meet with KRCD, and I also met with, we have meetings that we had with DWR. So you're correct, there is some interest. So going for a different kind of a grant proposal, working maybe with the Bureau of Reclamation, maybe with some of their CVPIA funds, since you're looking at endangered species, since we're looking at wetlands. I'd be happy to talk offline and share with you some of the grant opportunities that we were looking at, oh gosh, 5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Kathy, and we lost Rusty. I was gonna ask Rusty this question, if there was gonna be additional or a second round of funding coming through this DOC, and if that was the case, then maybe Tulare Lake needs to start thinking about putting together a package, and Mike would definitely then cover the Liberty project.
There's so many different baskets of money out there that.
There's so many different baskets of money, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to keep that straight, but Rusty and David can definitely help us on that.
And you know, the proposal I'm going to be talking about on the Pozo Canal, there might even be an opportunity because to look at it under the federal watershed program.
Yeah.
Which were there.
Yeah, which were there, Kathy, so I know, on the repurposing grant, I think if there's nothing else, yeah, we can move on to Pozo.
Yeah, Amir and Deanna and I met with the NRCS watershed program. Greg Norris is the state engineer, and then Ernest De La Riva is the watershed program. And what we've been talking about over the past few months is looking at some conveyance on the existing Pozo Canal, which in the past has always flowed from Pozo Creek and from the south up into the lake bed. But now it comes, when any flows are coming from the south to the north, it hits the Homeland Canal. And so what we're looking at is the feasibility, the possibility, I should say, I'm not going to use the feasibility term, the possibility of moving water when there's excess water that's coming down Deer Creek and into the Homeland Canal. And this project has been talked about for many, many years, but it will involve partnering with a lot of different organizations. However, this initial study, it's a feasibility study that NRCS, they have their own people that they're gonna do the study. And it's basically to look and see if the Pozo Canal conveyance, doing anything in conveyance, would meet their watershed program. So they would do an initial study. However, in the phone call, we came up with a lot of possible impediments, like who owns the canal. I know going across the BLM property, I've done research, there is an easement. But again, it's a very old and the easement is not clear. A couple of other things that we came up with is that we need to understand a lot of the existing infrastructure. We need to work with BLM and adjacent landowners. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, I'll call it homework, preliminary work, before NRCS could do this feasibility study on if this program our project even fits their watershed program. The advantage to going through it, and if it does fit, and if we do find out that everything, we can go through some of these impediments easily. Ultimately, we could be looking at $25 million through Public Law 566 that would provide for any kind of improvement of infrastructure and moving water to the white areas in Tri-County. But there's quite a few hoops we need to jump through. But right now, I'm doing a little bit of research, and we'll be working with Amir and Deanna on developing next steps. Deanna, Amir, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add, Kathy, is I was on a SGMA meeting yesterday, and the BLM is beginning to train their staff on SGMA issues now. In fact, they're going to have a workshop in December for their staff. They're mainly looking at what will benefit sustainable energy, so solar and water projects. But because they're showing more interest now in SGMA, we might have an opportunity to sit down with them again and discuss, what we can do out there on the 8,500 acres within Tri-County and how we can work together. So it seems like they're getting more engaged, and the workshop, I think, is a good step. So they're going to be more active, I think, in the future.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I talked to Tim Kelson, the manager at BLM. They are very interested in working with us. They are willing to entertain a rights of way across BLM property. But the problem is then it starts going across private land, and we probably need to research if there is an easement. But yeah, Tim is very interested in speaking with us because they would look at this as conveying water to some of the NRCS wetlands they have out there. And I think, Deanna, we've talked about some other management activities, and we do have an MOU between Tri-County and the BLM at this time. So I think it's more, opening up the door for cooperation.
Yes, and I agree that the biggest impediment to doing this is who controls the canal. So I think that's the first thing we're going to have to research. And once we know the answer to that, we'll know whether we can even go after the feasibility study. So.
Yeah, you're referring to the Pozo Canal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through Tri-County's area, at least.
Hey,
Thank
thank you, Kat. Oh, sorry.
Sounds good.
Sorry, Dan, sorry. All right, so item C, which is the well mitigation plan. This is probably the main topic for us today. Just a quick reminder to everybody, in the updated groundwater sustainability plan for the Tule subbasin, we said in there that the subbasin would prepare a well mitigation plan. Each GSA would prepare their own, and that we would have the first mitigation plan dealing with domestic wells prepared and submitted to or in place by December of this year. So, which is not a lot of time, but this is another item where this group, input from this group is critical. Stacey, I don't know, can you pull up the Harder memo and share on the screen as we go through this. And I'll give you a chance to do that, but, so the idea here was that, Tom Harder and the folks over at Four Creeks put together this initial, technical memorandum that deals specifically with water levels. They're also gonna put together one that, addresses some of the, issues for subsidence as well, and for water quality. So what I wanted to do, this is a draft memo that, that Stacy's gonna pull up here and put on the screen, but I do wanna make sure, each of you, if you received your emails, it should have been attached to the agenda email that you, received. And I just wanna take a second and kind of walk you through this. So this was, the idea here was the technical team of Harder, was to put together something that would help all of the GSAs. All of the GSAs have, you know, some similarity and some common ground on all of their.
Down a little bit, but more on the screen. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So I just, like I said, this is a draft. We are looking for comments from all of you. If you can please get all of your comments back to Deanna, a week from today, that would be fantastic. You know, that should give you plenty of time to take a look at this document. And any questions, concerns, clarifications, anything that you have, please get to Deanna. But the idea here was, domestic and municipal wells, and in the case of some of the GSAs, they want to include ag wells, which, Tri-County, we've had a lot of discussions, you know, Deanna and I have had a lot of discussions, and Tri-County originally and specifically did not include ag wells in our GSP, in our update to the GSP. The well mitigation section in there, the commitment is only to agriculture and municipal wells. We don't have, domestic, domestic and municipal wells, not agricultural wells. And that's an important distinction, because, you know, we feel that with, you know, more than, I don't know what it is percentage-wise in Tri-County, it's probably more than 95% of the pumping is ag. We don't feel, you know, that probably all has contributed somewhat to the overdraft situation that we're in, or has, you know, absolutely contributed. And we were not looking to do mitigation on ag wells. Questions?
What is the criteria? I mean, are we gonna cover every domestic well? Because I forgot, I was in another forum and asked that question. They said, no, there'd be other criteria based upon income levels and history of the well and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
Yeah, short answer, yes. There's gonna be other criteria for sure, 100%.
Because I didn't see that in their draft.
Yeah,
That's the portion that we're gonna get to develop more fully. So this is kind of a bare bones, you know, this is kind of the minimum.
Framework.
Although, you know, we did not, back to what Amir said, we said that we would, address domestic and municipal. But the sub-basin is, you know, going to include agricultural wells.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we're gonna have to be sensitive to that, and, but I also think there are a lot of sideboards with that as well, so.
yeah, Mike, they're definitely, just to be clear to everybody, this is not the plan. This is the minimum requirements that everyone in the GSAs, all the GSAs in the sub-basin have to meet. Our plan will be based off of this, but it will have a lot more criteria. And some of those questions you asked specifically about, well history for sure, and, income level is still an ongoing discussion, but, you know, we are, you know, right now we're leaning towards only people, it has to be a de minimis well, meaning you're pumping less than 2 acre-feet a year out of that well, which, you know, it's an ag well, or I keep saying ag well, domestic well, and you cannot be contributing to your own problem. So if you've got your rural residential well and you're surrounded by all of the ag wells that you own pumping around you,
Yeah,
and you're causing your own problem,
yeah.
it's not our problem at that. So as we would investigate that, we'd want to make it clear that those are situations that we would not cover. But if you have a rural domestic well, and again, this is where the cutoff year might come in, and it is going dry, then, and the initial work that we did on the database, if you remember back in the GSP, only showed about 6 wells that had the potential to go dry. They may have already have gone dry and been re-drilled, but we want to make sure that, and that's what that DWR database showed. But, you know, we want to be able to cover that and be able to tell DWR that, hey, you know, because we set our minimum thresholds and our measurable objectives here for the water levels, if this well went dry up here, we'll take care of it and help the landowner.
This really reads too, you know, we're responsible for 2015. We're responsible not to really, I mean, that's how they wrote it, as of 2015. If your well was basically viable in 2015 and now the water levels have dropped in a way that it's not, then the GSA needs to take a look and do those, investigations and find out, you know, if that was due to activity within the GSA
And we're
boundary.
dealing with aquifers above and below the clay.
Well, we're not pumping water below the clay, so the water levels are not going to go below the clay.
So all our domestic wells are above.
Yeah, if your well above the clay
Yeah.
is going dry or you're having impact, the impact may be that we may have to just lower your pump, which,
Yeah.
you know, there's one cost to that as opposed to drilling a whole new well.
You know, again, Tri-County is not, a GSA that has many domestic wells, but others do.
Yeah.
So this is quite
Yeah.
an issue for particularly Eastern Tule and Pixley and some others, and the funding's really gonna be an interesting situation, because, you know, we're gonna put these in place, but it's only contingent on how much funding we have available to manage it, so.
There are other programs, the SAFER program, that are out there right now, and they're being administered, they're state money, but they're being administered by, like, for example, Self-Help. And then I think the, Water Alliance, and there's a couple,
Tule,
Oh,
the Tule
the-
Management Zone.
the Tule Management Zone, yeah, there's a few other NGOs that are out there, and other, entities that are out there that, may receive or help, you know, direct some of that SAFER money that is safe.
Does that have to deal with the nitrate management plan too?
Yeah, so the nitrate, if you have nitrate impacts in your well, that is specifically excluded from this program.
Yeah.
But it'll be covered in the other one.
It'll be covered in
Yeah.
some of the other ones, yeah. So, you know, as we talk about water quality and other things, you'll get a separate memo, one of these memos for subsidence, and you'll get another one for water quality. You'll see in the water quality one is the nitrate issue is specifically excluded. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but on the other hand, you know, the decision was made at the GSP level that, hey, we're gonna set our water levels and there may be some impacts to some domestic wells. In our case, it was a very small. And again, I'm not saying that 6 wells are gonna go dry. I'm just saying that 6 has the potential to go dry based on the database information.
Wells doesn't bother me. That's an easy one.
Yeah, right, and it may be, they may have already gone dry and it may have already been re-drilled. We just don't know because we don't have enough information, but we want this program to be in place in case any wells do go dry.
And Mayor, beyond the 6, are we putting any standards, so like if somebody goes and puts a new well in, and let's say they should have gone deeper than what they do, and then their well goes out? I mean, is there a kind of a heads up, this is our target, so if you don't go deeper than that, you're on your own if your well goes dry?
Yeah, so we haven't decided on that 100%, Mike. That's still an ongoing, discussion about how to best do that. But that certainly is a discussion about, hey, let's make sure that people understand and know that this is where the water levels are being set, that measurable objectives are being set for this subbase or this GSA, and that they should, but how we're gonna enforce that, how we're gonna, do that.
Less clear.
Yeah, it's less clear.
And again, back over on the nitrate side, they probably ought to be looking at going lower anyway.
Right.
And when we were, working through the executive order with the county on permitting, those were the things I brought up to the county, that the county should, not approve permits to domestics that didn't take into account our minimum thresholds. And, the county basically said, we're not gonna do that, so back to you, GSA, and you don't get to approve domestic wells, so don't talk to us about that, so. It didn't go anywhere. Although I will say, on the Tulare Lake side, there have been a couple wells that have come across Dennis Mills' desk, and he has contacted the person who's gonna drill those wells and kind of said, this is too close to something else, and you should consider. I don't think he can force that either, but he has had conversations with people, and they have, chose to do something different, so. Yeah, it's something we have to look at as the wells come across the desk, is having those conversations, and, you may be successful, you may not be successful with a domestic driller, but.
No, we don't have the authority to approve, do we, like these wells you and I were talking about the other day, do we, I think they're,
Yes.
what we could do as Dennis did?
In Tulare County, they have a very good process. We are getting a list of all applied for permits and newly permitted wells in Tulare County every month now. And we see everybody's on the list that's within the county, from Cahuilla to, so I think it's successful. Kings is not as clear, they don't.
I go pull a report every
We can
month.
pull the report, it's not a good report. It takes a lot more effort to figure out what's going on, and they don't notify us individually, when a well's going in our area. So I think Kings County has, a lot to do to help the GSAs in that respect, so.
The other thing, Mike, I believe you asked about, we are gonna do a well registry program, and so the idea is to make sure that if you have to be part of our well registry program to be eligible for reimbursement in this.
That makes sense.
And so, if you don't get to just go in and say, hey, I drilled a well and now it went dry, and you guys owe me some money, you have to be part of our program, which means that we need to do a fair amount of outreach.
Yeah.
And make sure that each of the domestic owners and any municipal well owners understand that. But a good example of this might have been, like Allensworth had to re-drill their wells not too long ago. And that's what we talk about when we say, when I say municipal, I really do mean water supply wells.
You said wells, plural?
Yeah, they drilled two, yeah. Yeah, they drilled two. But we don't have a lot of communities in Tri-County, so unlike, some of the other, GSAs, Eastern Tule has tons of rural domestic wells.
But that registry they'll have to disclose the depth of the well and where the pump's at.
As we're gonna ask for all that information, and hopefully they have it, but, we'll have to work, for domestic well owners, we'll work with them. With the municipal guys, will be a lot more stringent in making sure that they do supply all the information.
And in a sense, participating in the registry opens the door to help if a case happens, right?
Right.
If you just close your eyes.
Can we go on, and if anybody on I'm sorry, I can't see if there's any hands up, but if anyone does have any questions as we're going through this, please let me know, and feel free to jump in at any time as we're talking, because we just can't see if you guys have any questions. So I just want to make sure that you have an ability to ask questions. If you can just scroll down just a tad more. Thank you, right there.
Right there?
Right, yeah, right there. So right above item number 2, that last paragraph you see before the numbered list, it says the mitigation will be applied only to those claims that are shown to be attributable to GSP, GSA approved or authorized activities. And Deanna, I've had a lot of conversations. Specifically, there's other language you'll see later on that talks a little bit about transitional pumping, and it keeps referring to transitional pumping. There are GSAs in the subbasin who do not have allocations the way Tri-County does, and the way Pixley does, and the way Eastern Tule does. And therefore, each of those 3 GSAs do have transitional pumping, but as you can imagine, the other 2 do not. And we don't think that that's the correct way to evaluate who is not contributing to the impacts. We're not, again, I want to draw a clear line between overdraft and impacts. You can still be within what you're considering to be a sustainable value, because, you know, if you're looking at a long enough time period, over averages, wet years, surface water, other deliveries, you can say, well, we're sustainable. But if your pumping in the dry years is causing impacts to the surrounding wells around you, that may not be considered transitional pumping. That's still an impact. So we want this to be written in a way that addresses impacts and not driven by the transitional pumping issues or anything else that's model related. Nothing against Tom's model. I think they did a fine job on the model, but any model is just a tool, and it is not the plan, and it is not reality. So what's actually happening in reality is what we're concerned about, and if there are impacts, and this is what DWR is also concerned about, is what are the impacts, not what the model predicted or showed, or what you think is a sustainable yield. If you've got water levels dropping because of pumping in the area, that's a real impact. Sorry, I just wanted to, I know that was a long-winded explanation, but I wanted everyone to be very clear that you'll see some comments on the final document by Deanna and myself that are going to specifically address the concern that we have about the use of the language of transitional pumping, and we did not include that, of course, in our GSP. If you're pumping and your pumping is causing impacts, you need to deal with that.
I mean, I've had some concern with the language that has been put in this, but I've decided just to work within that language, and when we write our own, right here it says attributed to GSP, GSA approved or authorized activities. So from my perspective, unmanaged pumping, so if you don't have an allocation program and if you don't have a transitional water allocation, then your pumping is unmanaged from my perspective, which, you know, could be attributed to GSP or GSA approved or unapproved activities. So if you have unmanaged pumping during drought times, I think you're just contributing just as much as those who have an allocation program, or maybe more.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective we're gonna move from. And I think that sets up less conflict between the GSAs instead of more conflict. You know, if you don't have a program, you're somehow exempt from mitigation, and you should look at your neighbor. So we're gonna make sure that everybody has to consider their own impacts.
Questions on that, or any concerns by anyone? That's an important one, just because, you know, this document file different GSAs to tell landowners that, hey, if the impact is occurring in this GSA, we think it's because of pumping in the neighboring GSA, and then you need to go as a landowner and get reimbursed by that or file a claim against that GSA.
Say that again?
If, a landowner that is being impacted in one GSA, if that GSA feels that they are within their sustainable value for that GSA, any impact to that, they're gonna address and saying pumping in the neighboring GSA is causing that impact to your well, and you need to file a claim with the neighboring GSA.
Earlier you had mentioned that some GSAs are going to also mitigate for agricultural wells.
Yes.
Does that same logic / argument apply?
Yes, so in ag well, in GSA one, if that GSA says, hey, your impacts are being caused by the pumping in the neighboring GSA, you should file a claim. We are gonna have a very strict policy about how an ag well could apply and have a very strict criteria for that. Because we believe that most pumping, vast majority of pumping across the entire subbasin is ag. It's like 7% or something. And, those have all contributed to the impacts that we're seeing.
Are they gonna blame us for everything, and then we're gonna have to,
You
they're
know,
gonna want us to contribute to
Well, I can
neighbors?
almost see it.
Yeah.
yes, me too, and that's what I feared. I brought that up in multiple conversations, that I thought that some of this language they were using was gonna cause conflict between the GSAs, and we should try to stay away from it. I also thought that really the only thing that we really needed to be of concern with was domestic wells, but, it's all in negotiation, and there were other GSAs in the room that were adamant. I do think we're going to end up looking at boundary conditions. We're probably, within a mile or two of the boundary. You could have a claim that is, a mutual claim, or, both sides are causing. We should be cognizant of the fact that we have Alpha in the center of us. They have more domestic wells. They're likely to have some boundary issues with us, possibly. And certainly Delano Early Mart would like to attribute a lot to others. I honestly think that the eastern Tule is going to be more affected by that condition than Tri-County, but regardless, we may have some mutual claims. I have a hard time believing that a claim within one GSA's boundaries will be attributed to another GSA in full. So that would be, I think that's gonna be a tough bar to get over, but.
But bottom line, we may be exposed to a lot more than 6 wells.
That's
Yeah.
true, absolutely.
There may be a lot more claims,
There'll be a lot more claims.
and those claims would be coming from the neighboring GSAs. That's our biggest concern, and that's, one of the things that Dan and I are trying to, as we read through this, is make sure that, there's appropriate language in here that addresses whatever that individual GSA is. Like, you heard me say this when we were talking about the GSP, and Dan said this several times. DWR doesn't care about your water balance. They don't care one iota about your water balance. If there's an impact to a domestic well or other well users, what are you doing about it,
We're
GSA?
blame regardless.
Yeah.
DWR is way up here at a high level, just saying, hey, you guys need to take care of domestic wells.
Yeah.
This is a Tule subbasin driven document, because we're down here and we get stuck in the minutia of my water balance is better than your water
Yeah.
balance, and
Yeah.
we're, so I would hope we can go up a level and kind of think of it the way the department's thinking of it. I think it would go a long ways to keeping everybody out of conflict, but we'll see what happens as we move through these mitigation plans. Everybody's just gonna look different. Some mitigation plans are gonna be very, very much, you're going to mitigate all of these factors, and others will have more sideboards such as ours, so they're not gonna be exactly the same, and I hope that doesn't set up another conflict, is what I mean to say, I think, but.
And the other thing that concerns me is I don't want people coming back to us with Tom's model and saying, you're causing this.
Yeah. Well, Tom's model has a lot of assumptions,
Yes,
and that was because of the imported water, and those imported waters are assumptions within the model. It's not actuality as far as hydrology, so, you know,
That's probably true for all of the GSAs included
All-
in the model area.
All
yeah,
models.
absolutely. It's true for every model. The model should not be treated as gossip. They're gospel, I should say.
it is
Like,
gossip.
It is gossip. Yeah, it should be treated as gossip, not gospel is what I meant to
Gospel
say.
gossip.
Yeah,
And that's what I think Tom's model is a good model, and we can
Right.
run scenarios, and we can, you know, make some predictions, because of that, but we're certainly not going to base the mitigation plans on that model.
the number one issue is you're all, well, and Deanna and I talked about this morning, was the model doesn't really know how much pumping is going on at each individual location. So, you know, a lot of the groundwater pumping values are taken from Land IQ and other, information like that, and we think that the Land IQ data is probably underestimating the amount of pumping that's actually. And so, you know, I'm not comfortable saying, hey, we're gonna, you know, if Tom's model says this, at this granular level, that well is being impacted by pumping in Tri-County. On a macro level, yeah, it works across the subbasins, sure. You know, we think that that's probably pretty good information, but on a granular level, like a well, I think that's way past the precision of the model. Sorry, got off on a tangent there. Anyways, I do wanna, so the document then goes through the process of how a claim is gonna be filed. It continues on, it talks about, providing, you know, an interim water supply to that landowner, you know, who's had this impact. Ultimately, I think it does say somewhere that if you, turns out that the GSA's activity did not cause the problem, that the landowner should have to, you know, reimburse, the GSA for that interim water supply, but we can,
That was left as a question.
Yeah, that
That
was-
was left up to the GSA to kind of put that in their mitigation plan. Do you want that? Do you not? Denial of access, to the well for inspection, would be a result of a denial claim for mitigation. So
there's some policy issues.
policy issues in here.
That need to be resolved as we come up with our actual plan. Moving it, I'm gonna, you know, 2.3 obviously is a municipal supply well connection, so hey, if you are in a location where you can connect to a municipal supply, then rather than, you know, re-drilling a well for, you know, a tremendous amount of money, let's connect you to the municipal supply. It then go through some data needs. I'm not going through every single section here, but, if anyone, I would encourage everyone to read the document and come up with, any comments. It then says, you know, this is the kind of data that you need to provide us. And then item number 3 on page 6 then goes into how those are going to be, claims are going to be evaluated. And again, you'll see some language in here that, is about transitional pumping. And Deanna and I are gonna comment on that and suggest other language that needs to either be included or replaced. I do think, because SGMA started in 2015, that I like the language there about you know, the impact having occurred after 2015. And then item number 4, section number 4, it talks about potential options for mitigation. And then it goes through, a series of nice flow charts and figures and forms, which, you know, again, the forms are great if the landowner has all this information. You know, and static water level and pumping water level and all kinds of other information that clearly a hydrogeologist wrote this, form because, a lot of municipal people might have this type of data, but, domestic landowners rarely tend to have
Yeah, no.
that level of information. But, it's good to, should they have it, it's great to have and include it in the forms. But again, I would encourage you to look through the forms, and if there's something that any of you see that need to be included, I would ask you to spend a little bit of time taking a look specifically at this, flow chart that Stacy has pulled up. I think the flow chart actually has, some important considerations to include as you're going through this and saying, is that sufficient reason to deny a claim or to move the claim forward? And that's, think about it. These are domestic well owners. These are not, multinational corporations or anybody like that. If the person on the other end is a domestic well owner and their well has gone dry, and think about, where do we want to have the ability to deny a claim? Now, the GSA is going to have a fair amount of discretion, and I think we're going to write it in that way because, these are our neighbors and everybody else, so we do want to be sensitive to that. But on the other hand, there's a limited amount of funding, and we haven't even talked about one of the big plans, or one of the big portions of this plan is going to be to figure out how we're going to fund, even if it's only 6 wells, Mike. That 6 wells, if they start getting deep enough, we could be looking at, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, I'm just looking at the practical side doing this. I'm a landowner, my domestic well goes out. I need water now,
Yeah.
and by the time you go through that, and then when you say emergency supply, out there it's not just drinking water, you got toilets, you got showers, and
Right.
so as a practical side, what do? You bring a tank and put it in place with a booster pump that hooks into the home system or whatever, so I don't know how you, from the practical part of this, if somebody takes the time submitting a claim, I mean, you're gonna talk several days, by the time you even get through that.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that goes back to, since we only have 6, our problem's a little easier, people ought to get onto the registry, so you basically have already pre-qualified. So the
Yeah.
minute something happens, if you had to do something, it would be a lot faster.
Right.
And because of the drought conditions, there are provisions out there that are administered through self-help and others to get drinking water to them, and in some cases truck water to them. But we would want to move these claims, if it's true domestic claim, and, we could pretty much see that this just happened, we're going to move it along fairly quickly.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not just a cup of water, it's, of
Right.
Yeah.
course, in the yards and all that stuff aren't gonna.
It's interesting, Mike, the word you chose, if my domestic well goes out. I could see these claims being from minor pump problem, and the users just don't realize that it's not to the groundwater level that's gotten lower than the pump, or even maybe lower than which are probably the worst case, the most expensive case. But in any case, when a domestic user's water supply stops, you do have to respond fairly rapidly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're right, there's the immediate response, and then there's the issue of how quickly can we evaluate their claim, and each of those items, and be able to say, yeah, this is legitimate, and let's then work. But, finding a new pump, getting a new contractor, or getting a contractor out there and install, or deepening a well, all of those can take months.
One thing I don't like about this, and just the concept, so it applies to all of this, you create this procedure. When something goes wrong with your domestic pump, you're never gonna feel like you're responsible. You're gonna always go to the indemnification entity, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna have some element of
water level's dropping, you know, you're gonna be sent back, so,
Yeah, no, but we're gonna have to deal with some of them, at least to sort out that it's.
yes, that's right. You're gonna have to sort it out, and then that's where the question came. If that happens and the claim is denied because it really isn't because of that, then do they have to reimburse you for the effort you put out to, you know, to investigate that? So those are hard questions, you know, depending on income levels and different things.
And I guess the other practice, are we obligated, or we're gonna take this on to go educate everybody out there? Because most people out there wouldn't even know about being able to get reimbursement or this program, and if your well went out, you'd call a well person, say, hey, switch broke, or the levels went down, I don't know what's going on, but I don't have any water, and they would just have a service come out. Or do everyone gets educated, so the first call they made is not to the well guy, it's, hey, Deanna, my well just went down, can you send somebody out? And it may not even be the water lowering. A good example, my parents their domestic well, and it turned out it was just a switch. But
Practically, which is well taken, but I think we're gonna be under obligation to inform the stakeholders about the mitigation program. And I think we're gonna be obligated to do that and to ask them to add themselves to the well registry. If they don't, then that's, you know, that claim, you know, I don't know. I'm not certain yet, but it is upon us to inform them about the program.
Yeah, we wanna do a good faith effort.
Yes.
In one,
Yes.
first creating, then implementing the program. But I think that are gonna be utilizing the program, that's,
Yes,
Sure.
that's right.
I think education is nice to talk about, but I take a lot of letters. And I don't think I'm the only person.
well, I think the other side, Carlo, if they do the registry, you're gonna see how which ones are vulnerable.
We ought to be able to.
You know, there may be some that have a lot of space left, yeah.
So, one of the things on that multi-purpose land repurposing grant, self-help is part of that. And there's a lot of money set aside for public outreach. So part of our plan is also to work with self-help and other entities and figure out best ways to reach the domestic well owners. We don't anticipate, you know, we don't think that there's a lot of them for us, but we are gonna use some of their help in trying to figure out how should we best, because, Carla, you're absolutely right. I get statements from, the city of Fresno all the time at my house, you know, saying, hey, there's a public meeting because there's some development going on, you know, in your neighborhood, and if you wanna come and comment. And I'm, you know, I actually understand land use issues, and I actually do show up, but not all the time. I will admit, not all the time, but.
You still do a little sorting, right?
Yeah, there's a fair amount of sorting, but I actually is someone who actually understands and lives this
Yeah.
business, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm just, you know, a rural landowner, I've got other concerns, and, you know, I'm not a registered civil engineer. I'm gonna, you know, keep going on. So, yeah, our hope is, we actually said this in the, GSP, that one of the reasons that we wanted more time and that to do this, specifically, is to allow us time to do the outreach efforts. And also get stakeholder input from this committee and others, so that this isn't, you know, I don't want Deanna and I to be dictating to you guys. We want stakeholders to respond back to us and raise these concerns.
We're okay, you can dictate as long as you step up and.
Yeah, so.
I've gotta get more people to the committee meeting, evidently. I'm gonna have to talk to some people.
So just in the interest of time, because we do want to get done, on time here, I would encourage everyone, please read the document in its entirety. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not the GSP plan. This is the bare minimum that all the GSAs have to, comply with. It is a draft. We are looking forward to your comments. Please get them to Deanna, and, by next Wednesday. And again, you will get something similar for subsidence, and/or water quality. You'll get draft memos like this. We were hoping to have all of them by today, but that's not the case, and we understand everyone is busy right now. Any questions from anyone on the call?
Yeah, I have a quick question. This is Kathy. I think you're aware that CWI, California Water Institute, Carl Longley, they're doing some work on consolidation that's separate and apart for everything you're doing. Is there any reason to reach out to them on this particular program? I don't know if it's relevant or not. I just happened to be in the car with Sarge yesterday.
I don't think we're there yet, Kathy. I think that their consolidation is very preliminary, and these mitigation plans have to be, for the domestic wells, I have to have, you know, something pretty concrete here in two, 3 months. So
Yeah.
they you know, are still working on governance and what all of those different things are going to look like. So I don't think we're at a point of collaboration on the mitigation program yet.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mike, Carl, no? Okay. Again, Wednesday next week, please. We welcome and want your comments. Last item here that we've got is the round 2 grant. We talked a lot about the round 1 grant and where we're at and how we're moving forward on that, some of the projects. And by the way, we will give you updates every month on the Allensworth project as we move along on that and where we're at and how that's coming along, so you'll know how that money is being spent. But the round 2 grant is coming out soon. We don't know exactly when.
I do have news on that.
Oh, you do?
I think we might receive a news blast next week, and the proposals are going to be due November 30th.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to think that was very good news.
So the state, I was going to say, the state kept saying it's going to come out in October, and, but we hadn't heard anything. Was that through Aqua that you heard
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Next week.
Well, next week is October.
Yeah.
Yeah, next week is October, yeah. So we have been meeting, both with the Tulare Lake folks, and Deanna and I have been having a lot of conversations on trying to figure out what projects we should include in the round 2 grant. The round 2 grant is actually a larger sum of money. As you can see, it's anywhere from $2 to $20 million is what all of this, everything I'm saying today is based on what we have. You know, when the grant application comes out, for sure, we'll know more. At least they're not doing it over Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take that as a plus.
Yeah.
But we do, there's a big, long list of eligible projects, including land repurposing. Like, I actually looked up what was available for round 1, and assuming they didn't change it. Metering is another one. So there's a lot of potential projects out there above and beyond, you know, just recharge basins and things like that. Couple things that Dan and I threw out, and Carl, you and I are going to talk about this afterwards, is, you know, that improvement on the White River Channel, or at least a portion of it. We know it's been improved right next to Allensworth, but as you go east, from that point of diversion, there may be some areas that we may want to improve there. So we've talked about that. So there's some projects that we have at least mulled over and said, but I do want to make it available and open to all of you. If there's projects that you are considering that you think might be a good project to include, a recharge basin, at the land repurposing, all of that, we are open and more than willing to include in this. It is a competitive process. I do not believe that most, or probably very few, will get the full 20 million.
Yeah, it's a competitive process, and the medium priority basins are included in this grant funding too, so it's gonna be even more competitive.
More competition.
I did hear though that it's a short spend, this money has to be spent by July of 2026, so some of the medium basins are not really prepared to go after that money yet, cause they don't believe they can get the project done and completed by that time.
Right.
So, you know, if you had a project that you knew you could get through, unfortunately, some of these projects, you know, depending on how the CEQA process goes, I mean, we do have that streamlined CEQA process right now, but who knows how long that's gonna last or how many you can get through. And so, you know, environmental concerns sometimes keep the project, from being completed in 2026. So I think those are the kind of things that, basins are gonna have to look at when they go after this money.
Yeah, so there's a lot of considerations, but the list of eligible projects is pretty broad.
Pretty broad.
And what they're considering ineligible list is shockingly small. I mean, you can't do a water trading, for example. The water trading market is not, eligible. But that's always first on my list, but, that's not eligible. We can't spend money to do that, but we can do, you know, studies, we can do, conveyance structures, we can do, you know, recharge basins.
Since through 2026, can we again include the 2025 revision
Yes,
plan?
yes, you can.
That should be in there.
Yeah, the 2025 update to the plan, which you all know, the first plan cost $1.8 million, something like that.
On both sides of the fence?
On both sides, yeah. You wanna include that money in this
Yeah.
plan, for sure. Might as well get the state to pay us for that. Who knows, was it Rusty that just said earlier, or David, one of them said that, you know, it's feast or famine, right?
Mhm.
And, it's a feast right now, so might as well take advantage of all the money that we can.
Yes.
For sure.
I get frustrated with the Tule because they do not ever wanna include
Studies,
that, you know, the revisions or anything, they want the GSA to pay for all that and then just go after projects with the money. But, you know, we're at a point where the have and have-nots, and the haves that have water, they want more and more money for more and more of their projects because they're in a position to take advantage of it. And, you know, the GSAs that don't have those projects or good access to surface water for a project get left behind or get nothing, and I don't think that's right, so.
So in Early Mart, definitely, you know, they submitted 4 projects, like, or maybe 5 projects for that first round, in which one was selected. So they have tens of millions of dollars in projects ready to go right now.
Yeah.
They would say, hey, you can put all these in. They're recharge projects, right? So they score well, they look good,
And they're great, there's nothing wrong with them, they're fantastic, but unfortunately, the way we've cut ourselves up, it only benefits them.
Right.
The rest of the sub-basin, particularly the wide area people who need conveyance and need, you know, they have the biggest need, they get left out. It's a problem for me, I don't know.
Look, any recharge project benefits the sub-basin as a whole.
Oh, sure.
You know, rising tide lifts all boats, that saying. But, on paper,
Right.
it doesn't, because on paper, they then say, okay, this is my water, even if that recharge water ends up, you know, moving somewhere else. And that's part of the concern that we have, is that it's not nearly as attractive if it's just on.
Deanna said something to me quite some time ago about the GSA's adopting rules. I kind of like what you said, that water that added to the basin helps the basin in general, but then you carve it up into all these rules too. So
Yeah.
guys can protect their turf
Yeah.
at the expense of some other turf, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Carl, everyone says, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, go back to the Department of Water Resources, they are looking at impacts. And really, if you could take a look at where are the impacts occurring, what is the Department of Water Resources gonna see as a negative zone or a negative impact, and then we could target projects as a basin to try to alleviate some of those impacts, I think would be great, but I have not been successful in getting the group to think that way, so everybody's gonna grab for the money for their area, and, that's the way it's gonna be for now.
So just in closing up this item, I would encourage everyone to start thinking about projects. If you have questions about whether a project is eligible, or even if you have a concept of a project, bring it to Deanna and let's talk. We are open, you know, the GSA is open to suggestions, and we can come up with some ideas, and we have, you know, Deanna and I have talked about some that we think might work, but we would love to get input from everyone else. And as Deanna just said, this thing is gonna come due here very quickly, so we don't have a lot of time. We were all hoping, you know, we've been talking about this, but it's gonna be quick. All right, let's wrap this up and I'll let everyone get out of here on time. Our next, the Tri-County Water Authority Board meeting is a special meeting on October 4th.
Correct, 1 o'clock.
Next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. You wanna talk a little bit about that, or is there anything you wanna share?
Sure, let's see, I only have a couple left on the call, but the last board meeting, the board created a seat for the Southeast Management Area, and at this, meeting, we have 3 candidates that have put their, name in the ring, and we'll be considering those candidates, the board will consider, for, appointment to the position, to the seat. And if any comments have been received on the GSP revisions, the deadline is this Friday, so we will know. If there are any comments received, we will review those comments as well. Those are the main things on the special agenda.
Yep, and the very last thing that we have is our next meeting is on October 26th at the same time. I will not be here. I will probably be, that's what, a Wednesday? I will be in Arches National Park.
Oh, good for you.
Good for you.
Yeah, and, Alex Petlak, who you all know, is probably gonna come in and
Oh, great.
cover that meeting for me. So, we're still gonna have a meeting, we're just, I just won't be here with you guys.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kathy.
Hey, Deanna, I will send you that job description for the trust if anybody's interested. I'm really trying to get the trust connected more with TCWA. So I'll send you that.
Okay, take
Okay.
care, Mike.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thanks.
Like,
Bye, Kathy.